Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back to our channel. So I'm really glad that you are here making this journey with us, and still quite interested to learn something new and improve yourself. And I will. Um, I'm really glad you're doing so, actually. And I think without further ado, we can actually just jump right in. And we are going to start from where we left off, and like we discussed in the first video, in the second one we will try to cover these topics over here. So we'll do a short introduction to backend development, of course using Go. I'll show you what requests and responses, what they could look like, what they're made of, and then of course we'll try to use a framework, because of course we can do this with like native libraries more or less that are native to Go, but of course this will not give us the flexibility, and of course we might have to develop a lot of things ourselves, and that's why I would use a framework, because again this has been curated over the years by a lot of dedicated engineers, and more or less to make this a lot easier for us to develop with it. And to do that, of course, we will be working with the Gin framework. I will introduce you to it, and you really don't need to have a prior experience working with Gin, but I will try as much as possible to give you everything you would need regarding working with Gin. And then I'll show you how you can do routing, how you can work with databases, how you can connect, of course, to SQL and NoSQL databases, and I'll try to make this as descriptive as possible, because I really want you to grab all that's possible to be grabbed. And I will show you how to work with ORMs. Of course, this will be pertinent to SQL databases, and I will also show you how we can work with raw queries in this whole setup. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Let's start, and I am really excited to show you how this is going to work. So like I promised you, if you look over here in the README, coming over to the second topic down here, we agreed that for these videos, the code we write more or less for each of these videos would be checked out in these different branches, as you can see over here. So what I will do, of course, is more or less create a new branch. So I'll say git checkout, and want to create a new branch, and we call it web app. And now we are on the web app branch, and this is how it's going to be for all the other tutorials. So if you want to just specifically look at what we did for a given video, all you have to do is to check out this repository, go to the correct branch, and you'll have the code right there. So now I would want to initialize our project, because as you can see right now we've not written any code. So to do that, I would need the command go mod init, and I give it a name, and more or less use the URL or something that looks like the URL where this repository will be living in. So my GitHub name is Basilica, and I put that here. And then I can call this Golang guide. And what that will do, of course, we just create a Go mod file for us with this name. And if we want now, when we start working and want to reference our modules, we would always have to prepend them with this name over here. And so what I can also do is just go ahead and create a main file, and we have that over here. And I can already just create a main function, and of course I have to specify the package initially. So I can just bring this down, and then package main, and here I can just print line. 1 second, of course, func main print line, and I can see something quite typical, hello world, and save this. And now I can just run this, go run main.go, and we should get our hello world. And of course, if we want, we can build this out and spin out a binary, and I can say go build, and I can provide the output file, and I can maybe want to call it main.exe because I'm working on Windows. And here you see the binary, and now I can just do this way, main.exe, and we'll still get our hello world. Again, we will start more or less with a short introduction to web development. And in Go, without us having to introduce any new packages, I will show you how more or less you could work or build web servers in Go without actually needing to install any other third-party library. So we'll use basically what's provided by Go. And what I would want to do here is actually quite simple. So here I'll create a very simple function. This would be my handler. And because of course the way it works is we have to, when we set up a server which more or less runs in like an infinite loop and constantly listens, what happens is we'll have to expose some endpoints, and those endpoints could be anything, could be, let's say, slash something like slash login, for example, slash logout. You can already imagine. And then we have to decide what should happen when someone accesses our server at any of these endpoints. What should happen? What should be the reaction from our server? And if you, for example, logging into social media, any of them, and you hit the login URL, more or less you always have to provide some credentials, for example your username or your password in most simple cases, and then you now have to determine what should happen. More or less you take that username and that password that the user has provided, you try to verify if they are actually who they say they are, and if they are, then you decide on what you have to do. And we are going to create two endpoints that would behave more or less, would assume that we have a hypothetical server, and that will allow people to log in and log out. There would not be, we'll really just focus on the functionality. We don't really care about what should happen in login and blah. We just want to really focus on the functionality and how we want to provide this to the user in the first place. And so I can define some handlers, and these handlers are nothing so special. They are actually the actions that will be executed when, for example, you visit slash login. That's just one way to think of it. So the action that needs to happen when you visit an endpoint, that is what I am referring to as handlers in this course. So I can call this handle login request, and of course because it's coming from the user, this is a request, and if we have to send something back to the user, this is a response. Just like showing you the basics here. And this function, for us to be able to use this function as a handler, it has to have a certain signature. It has to take two arguments, which will of course be the response writer and the request. And convention normally is that people just use W because nobody wants to actually type out the whole thing, and this should be of type HTTP response writer, and it also takes another argument which would be of course the pointer to HTTP request. So HTTP requests like this, and this is what the signature of the function should look like. So any endpoint we want to define using this net HTTP library, more or less within the Go standard library, have to have this signature. So we can actually just duplicate this now, and this would be like we discussed. So this would be logout request, as simple as that. And now the only thing we want to do is to just do something with what we get in here. That's really it. So what we can do here is maybe simply just just log something to the screen, for example. So we can say fmt, and let's do an fprint, and now I just maybe I need to format this, of course, and now I provide my writer, and now I can just make something like hello, something like hello from the login endpoint, something like this. And what I can do maybe is to maybe log the path as well, and maybe something like say you visited, and I would need to do some append some string more or less here, and then that would of course come from our request. So here I can go to the URL and get the path, something like this. Pretty straightforward. And I can just copy this for now, just for simplicity. Paste that over here, because the point is just for you to understand how this whole thing works. And I will say hello from the logout endpoint you visited, something like this. Pretty straightforward. And now, of course, the IntelliSense is complaining because these functions were defined and not being used at the moment. And what we can do, of course, is to come over here and basically use it. It's very simple. So now what we can do actually is to hook up the functions that we've created, and you can actually see how easy it is to set things up. So what I will now do actually is to hook these functions up, and to do that is actually quite simple. I use a handle func method from the HTTP library. I say HTTP handle func, come on, handle func, and then I provide the URL. So I would want this to go to login, and I need to add a function. Again, I can see over here the function should have this format. It should be a handler that has this format. It takes a response writer and of course a request, and that's already what we have here. So we can just provide our login handler. So I say handle login requests like this, and that's fine. And we can again duplicate this, put it out here, and change this to logout, and this will become handle logout request. As simple as that. And this way we can actually define as many URLs as we want to. And the next thing we want, of course, is then to call the listen and serve method, which would listen infinitely for requests that come to our server. So now we'll say HTTP listen and serve. Of course, this will be just for development, because this will be a HTTP server, not a HTTPS. If you would want it to be a HTTPS, where you have like certificates and everything, it would be listen and serve TLS. But for now, we are keeping it simple. And here I would want to provide the URL where I would want our server to run on. And of course, what I can just do here maybe is to provide a port, and I would want to open port 8080. And here I need to provide a handler of our listener, but here for now I can simply just say new. And that's actually all the code we need to set this up. So we can actually just move this print method we have over here, bring it down and say something like maybe listening port 8080, and then we'll put some dot to make it look intimidating. And now we can simply run a method again. So now I can actually remove this exe file that we have here, and I can say go run main.go, and I can move this up a little bit so we see what's going on. Of course, my bad, this needs to actually be before our listen and serve, because again this is an infinite loop and it will never get to this line. So we bring it over here, and then we run this again, go run main.go, and now we should see it say listen at port 8080. And to verify that everything is working, we can open this new terminal and use our call command, and we go to localhost 8080, and then we can go to login, and you see here, which is of course the message we have over here. It says hello from the login endpoint you visited. We get the path, and then you see that over here, login. And if you try the same for logout, and we also get something pretty similar. And it's actually as simple as that. And one thing we can also of course do is maybe also serve static files, because we might want to serve, say, HTML files to the user, and to do that is actually again pretty straightforward. All we have to do is to come over here and define a file server, and I can call this fs. Again, we get this from the HTTP method. So here we have our file server, and I would want to provide the path again, and I'm probably just going to leave this at the root. I would want to not do it this way. I would want to provide the path to where our assets would live, and I would use HTTP dir this way, and then I provide the path, and this is probably going to be in a folder called static. And I can just also come over here, create a new folder, and I call this static like this. And now what I need to do is, of course, to set this up by again providing a handler for it. So say HTTP handler like we did before, http.handle. Now we are not going to use the handle func because of course this is not going to be a function. This is more or less a file server, which is like what it says. And then we provide the path, and I'm probably just going to point it to the folder. So I will say static like this, and then now I can just provide the file server here, but I would want to strip the static folder string just in case we have files, let's say home.html or stuff like that, or index.html, and this doesn't mess up our URL. So I can just do like a http strip prefix like this, and then I can quickly just provide again the path or static files like this, and then I can provide the file server, and that's all we have to do. So now if I restart the server this way, we will get of course everything should still look fine, but maybe what I can do in here is I can provide a file, say login.html, and here I can say HTML like this, and maybe provide some flesh to this. I can provide a head, and I don't know, maybe some title, and I would say maybe Golang server, I don't know, something like this. And then I can maybe, I don't know, provide a body, and in the body I can provide h1, and I can say login. This is really just me messing around actually, and I can add a paragraph, and I don't know, maybe add another h3 and say something like you visited the login page, something like this. And then so if we go to the browser and go to local hosts 8080 and we go to static, we will actually see this file, and if we click on it, of course we'll see the content. Nothing much here, but of course you can actually add some functionality to this by using templating, and so you can actually pass data into this HTML, do some rendering and stuff like that. There's so much you can actually do if you want to go this route, but just for your notice, for our video we will not go this route. So for now this is more than sufficient, because anyway we will not be building our server entirely using this net HTTP library provided by Go. We will more or less use the Gin framework as we discussed earlier. So what we will do now is to scrape all of these and actually start building our server with Go, with the Gin framework rather. So what we will do now more or less is to clean all this out. So maybe what I would do would be just to comment this out, so you can always have this and come back to it later if you would want to just take a look at it. And now what we would want to do is of course define our function again. So we define our main function, and now we will move over to writing our server with Gin. And here I would need to import Gin, so and I can really get this from github.com/Gin-Gonic/Gin like this. And what I can just do here is to initialize an router in Gin, and then we can of course install this package and start development. So I say gin.default to use the default router more or less. And now I can shut this down, say go mod tidy, and this should install this for us. And what we'll do is more or less recreate what we did with this net HTTP that came bundled with the Go, and then we can now start our development from there, just to have the minimum working solution we initially had. And now our installation is done, and what we can now do is just go ahead and start setting up the server. And again, I can quickly just set up the routes, and here I can make this a GET request. Again, the URL would be to use initially login. And now the difference here is that the handler now has a different signature. It should also again be a handler fork, but in this case it would take a Gin context. So what we can again do here is to define our login. If I can type to the login handler, is going to take a Gin context. This way that is the signature of this function, and it doesn't have to return anything actually. So again, I'm just going to print something here and say fmt.print line and say you visited the login endpoint, something like this. And I can maybe duplicate this and do same for our logout endpoint. And now what we can do is just quickly hook this up here. So for our login route, you can just pass our login handler this way, and again we can simply duplicate this and do the same for our logout handler. And of course it should not be login, it should be logout like this. And actually that's all we need to do. What we can now just do is come down here and call the engine.run, call the run method, and that's actually all we need. So if we come back here again, and the one thing I think this is fine because we have the option to provide an address, and maybe I can also just provide this. So again, I provide 8080, but I think this is also the default route, and I can also just copy what we had over here, this one, just so we get a feedback when the server is running. I'll put that here. And again, go run main.go, and we should get our message up here. We can get it down here. Of course, that's our server is running on port 8080. But again, the nice thing is that we get this. You also get to see all our routes, and of course, this will only be possible if we run this in the debug mode. But I will show you that later on. So, but again, we can again come over here, localhost 8080, and we go to login. And again, we're actually not returning anything to the user, but if you look over here, we are just logging something to the console. And to return something to the user is actually pretty forward. We say c.json, and maybe I provided 200 code, and here I can just maybe say UVC. Again, I'm just going to duplicate what we had here, visit the login page, something like this. And I can again copy this, put it down here as well. So I replace this with logouts, and then try this one more time and clear this space. And now we can do the same, and we get our response back just like we had it initially. So what we'll do now more or less is start setting up this whole thing and how it should look like, because again, if you look over here what we have to do, so we looked at how we can work with this on my HTTP requests and responses, and now we are moving over to Go. And now we're actually going to go in details on how we can work with routing, and then after that we talk about databases, ORMs, and of course we wrap it all up. So what I would want to do now is actually set this up in such a way, because what you can already imagine is that if we have a server with tons of endpoints, we would not want to clutter our main page, because again, this is going to be really difficult to manage. So to keep things simpler, what we can do is to create a folder here, and we call it handler. And then inside of here, we can even create another one. We'll call this auth, for example, and we can maybe create another one here, and we give it maybe users. For now, it doesn't really matter if it has anything or not. And on the auth, we can now create a file, and we call this login.go. and of course have to provide the package. The package is auth, and we create a new one. Again, we call this logout.go like this, and again we specify the package. And now if we go here, we can simply just copy this guy, and then we come to login, put it in here, remove this one of course, and then we go to logout and put this here, and that should be fine. So now what we can do, again, to remember what our package, our module is actually called, if you go to go mod, you can just copy this name, and now if we go to our main method, we can just provide this here. So this will point to the root of our application, and now we can go to handler and we go to auth. So we can now come down here and say auth.login handler like this, and that should be fine. And now what we can quickly do, of course, is to go into all of these files and make sure that the names are all starting with capital letter, otherwise it will not be exported. So we change this to all caps, and then we can come back here and change this to this should be login, and this should be logout, and that should be fine. And now to make sure that, maybe I just take all of this one out so we can have a clean working space, and I can maybe create a new file here, and I can call this maybe set intro, something like this, intro.go, and of course I make it package main, and I just dump this in here. And now, so if we come back here, we should have a clean working space, and to make sure everything is still working as it should, we can just go ahead and restart our server and again try to visit each of the endpoints, and everything should still be fine. So this is how we can actually start structuring our code. And again, what we can do also is maybe come over here and define a new folder, and I can call this API. And inside of API, I can have another one called API.go, and then under this I can have another one called auth.go like this. And of course I need to specify the packages, package API, and also the same here, package API. And what I would want to do more or less is to move this logic that we have here over to this place. So I can just define a function here that says new like this, and I can dump all of this inside of it. And what I can also do more or less is to so that's, of course, if we call this new method, then we have everything we need. So if I come back to main, I can actually now copy this and move it here, and this should be fine. And now in our main method, we simply call API, and now we can say API.new, just like this, and this should be fine. And now if we go back to API, of course everything should still be fine again, like we did before. Just to be sure that we're on the right track, we can again restart the server, come over here, try to visit it, and see that everything is still working. We get it 200 back, as you can see over here. And of course, to manage our routes, what we can again do is to separate each of these routes. So what we can do is we can come inside of auth, for example, and then we define a function, we can call it auth routes like this. And what we can do is that maybe we can provide a router, which will of course be of type engine. And what we can now do here is to provide a group, and we give it a name, or we can call this auth. And of course we have to parameterize this. I can call this G like this. So this will be the group, and now I can copy what we had here again, move this, come back here and put it in, and now I replace all of this with G, so they all get grouped under here. And again, I can move this one away from here, bring it in here, because I need to put this under braces, put that to a new line, and come up here and then paste this one in. And so that's here. We don't need to do this anymore. We can now simply say auth route, something like this, and we pass the engine to it. And then again, let's see if everything is still working fine. And we test again. And now, of course, this is to be expected. Of course, our server is up. But again, if you look over here, you now see that it's no longer just login, for example. It is now auth/login. And here, of course, maybe I move this a little bit to the side and also close this one up a little bit, and I can restart this again. So hopefully we have everything in one line. But the point is now, because we are grouping this over here, as you can see, auth would of course get prepended to all of this. So now instead of visiting the login page, we now need to go to auth/login, and it should still be fine. And again, if you can already imagine, what it means is that if we, for the users we have over here, all we need to do is to come over here again, create a new file called users.go, and then add the routes like this. And maybe to make it a little bit interesting, we can make the name more descriptive. We can say add auth route, something like this. And then we can come in here and then replace this. So if we add more, we can say add user route, something like this, and then we still pass a router, and it should still be fine. And of course, you can already understand where we're going with this. One more thing we can do actually is to maybe come over here and version our app more or less. So I can define a version up here, and I can just call this maybe v1 like this, and maybe I can even make it a const. It doesn't matter. And what I can now do is, to our new method, I can pass a version which will be of type string, and then what I need to do now is to pass this here, and I pass the version. And now what I can now do more or less is to define our routes in such a way that we also, apart from passing the engine, we can pass a version which again will be of type string. And then what we now need to do is just here we pass the version that we get. And then if we come to auth again, from here we can actually just now maybe add this here and say version plus auth this way, and maybe we just do it like this. This should be fine. So if we restart our server, let's see what that will be looking like. And now we have, so now I would need to actually separate this way. So after auth, actually after our version, so before auth, more or less like this, and this should be fine. So if now we restart the server, and we should get something like /v1/auth/login. And now again, if we come back here, we can do v1, and it should still be fine. So the point is, we now have the option to more or less version our APIs. So if something changes, for example, we can gradually, let's say if we have a version 2 of our API, we can gradually migrate our APIs, because what we can do is, let's say we have another one here, apart from auth routes, we have, say, user routes. Here we can actually, if we have fully migrated the user endpoint, we can simply maybe just pass v2 here, for example, and everything will be fine. Everything relating to auth will become v2. And if we wanted to, when we're done migrating everything and we now want to completely move to v2, we simply come here and change this to 2 and restart our server, and everything would now point to version 2 of our API, as you would see down here in the output. So if you look down here, we now have v2 for all of them. Again, if we come back here, we have to now visit the new endpoint, which is at version 2, and then we still get what we need to get. Pretty straightforward. So the point, of course, is to show you how you can, of course, define your functions, define your handlers, group them in a proper way, That's a lot easier to manage, and of course you can collaborate with people to develop applications much faster. And we also looked at how we can structure our APIs in such a way, again, to group them or group similar endpoints. If you don't believe me, what we can do is to maybe we just copy this one, for example, and then we come to users and we create a file. We can call this create.go, something like this, package users, and then I can call this create handler, and then I would say you successfully created a new user, something like this. And actually I can just change everything here, so I can already just return to the user here. I can take this one out and maybe just provide a 200 here, and then I can just copy this one again and maybe create a new one here. I can call this delete. And of course, because you structure your APIs this way, you don't have to call this create user, delete user. It's already within the user package, so there's really no need. It's going to be redundant. And here we can change this now to delete, as you can see. And now the only thing we would need to do now is to come to our API, create a new file, and we'll call it users.go, and we simply just copy like what we have here for our auth. We just copy everything. I'm just going to copy everything and dump it in here. And now I call this add user routes, and now I don't want to go to auth, I want to go to users, right? And now I can change this to users. That's maybe create user, and then this one would be users that delete user. And of course you need to do some modifications, so the grouping we'll call this users or user, as the case may be, and this would be a post, and this would be a delete, as simple as that. And this would be create, and this would be delete. Pretty straightforward. So if we close this one just so we can see everything, and we restart our server, if I move this up a little bit, you would now see our APIs. So, and of course we have forgotten to add the user endpoints, typical. So we can just again come over here and say add user routes, like this. We pass our router engine again, and we pass our version. So if you see over here, just because this line was not added, we don't see the routes. And if we try to visit it, of course it's going to return the 404 not found. So but if we restart our server now, we'll see our 4 endpoints, and now you see them. So it's versioned, is grouped. So all these ones are related to auth, and these ones are related to users. So we don't have to create an endpoint called create user, because they are grouped. We already have v2/user/create. Pretty straightforward. And again, we can try to visit this localhost 8080, and we go to /v2, and we go to user, and we go to delete, and we get a, of course this should be a delete endpoint, and we are making a get request, as you can also see here. So this is making a get instead of a delete. But just to also show you that this is working, what we can do is I can just create a file here in the root, and I can call this http, and this is going to be the file I will use to do all my testing. This should be, I have an http extension, and now I can make a new request, and this would be a delete, and this will be going to http, go to localhost, go to 8080, go to v1, go to user, and we'll go to delete, and it's going to be 1 second. I can quickly look at the extensions. I call this I'm using actually an extension called REST client, as you can see over here. This is it, and I just want to look at what the syntax looks like one more time, and then so it's something like this. Actually, this is what I'm looking for. So I almost got it. And then I can come back here and replace this with this. And now I can send my request. And it still returns 404. So HTTP localhost 8080 v2, of course. So, and now we see this. And I think our message is wrong. So if I go back to our files and go to our handlers, go to users, go to delete, it should be something like you have successfully deleted or let's say, let's mind our grammar. So we say deleted the user, and then we try to restart the server and visit the endpoint again, and we get this. It's pretty straightforward. So maybe I shut this down now because I would want to not leave the code editor. I'm trying to do everything in here so you can actually not get distracted with me moving around a lot. And so again, I'm using this extension REST client because this allows me to make HTTP right here on my code editor. I don't have to use any additional tool like Postman or Insomnia, as the case may be. Actually visit the web page in the browser. I can test everything here from my code editor. And that's really the point.